This conference will now be recorded.
Just opening developer console, and I think in last session we started understanding about the data types. Okay, so I created one of the component data types, and we are trying to understand about the different data types. So in general, you can also refer the documentation for a full list of data types available. So there are different types like basic types, means string and date and number. So those are the some of the basic types. And also we have collections like list and a set map. And also there is a generic type called object. Okay, so we have all those different types. Okay, so based on the need, maybe going forward examples also we use. So this array type or list type maybe works in same way, but the advantage with the list is you can define any type of value in a list. It can be an integer, it can be a boolean or any kind of value we can maintain when you define the type as list. Okay, so just understand about that. Okay, I think 1 second. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So maybe I'll define those types and explain. So for now, whatever we are seeing, this is an array, and this is how we give the default values, and we are iterating. Here we are also understanding about the Aura iteration. If you want to refer attribute, we have to use v dot in the name of the attribute, and this is how we need to iterate. Already we understood about that. Let me define a type with the data type list. Okay, so maybe just define a type. Just we say list. So it can assign any kind of value. It can be a string value. It can be a non-primitive type. Right, list of records. So anything can be stored into this type when you take as a list. Okay, maybe here I'm just giving like this. Okay, this one also in the same way you can iterate and you can show, right? So maybe I can copy this and paste this. And here I can say skills. Okay, this also works in a same way. Okay, maybe let's deploy and see the preview. So we need to right click on that folder, deploy, click on preview. So I think here I need to include this type. Data types is our component, data types. So now if you see the preview, just we are using this application, right, for our preview purpose. Okay, so maybe here I did not change this skills, and maybe like this, deploy. And just refresh. Okay, so now if you see, so I think nothing is there, right? So let's see what is the problem. Skills. So we have to say v dot skills. Yeah. So here we have to say whatever the variable we are iterating, we have to give them. So that's the problem. Just to deploy. Now just refresh and you will see. Okay, so in the same way, object if you take, you can also assign any type of value. Maybe we see those things going forward. And one of the type object, right? When you have a standard object or custom object, we can also define that type as a attribute. Okay, so let's see. So further, Aura attribute name. So let's say I'm saying account type, saying account, and if you want to give the default value, okay, this is something we need to know. So if you want to give the default value when you define the standard object or custom object type, so like this here, we have to specially mention about S object type, and we have to mention object API name. What is the object we deal, and later the other field values. So let's say I want to assign value into name, right? So I'm giving like this, right? Yeah, I'm just giving like this. Okay, this is the way. The main thing is like this. We have to give the default value. So that way, right? One of the account record information is here. Anyway, how we do dynamically, I'll show going forward. That day to day we do. So these things, few things which we don't touch, maybe very frequently. Occasionally, when you need to do like this will be helpful. So now let's see the preview of this. For this also, maybe to show, I'm defining one of the card. So in this card, I want to show this account information. Okay, so here, maybe I'm taking lightning layout to align it in a proper way. And inside this lightning layout item, lightning layout item. So no need to really by heart. If you go to component library, you can see this lightning layout item. So all those things you can see. Okay. Just it is like how we use page block section, item, right? So it is like that. Okay, this is like page block. This is like one of the section, right? This is like item like that. Okay, so here I want to show that account name, label, and value. For now, I'll say account name colon. So to refer, this is the dynamic expression. To refer any attribute, we have to say v dot name of the attribute account. It's account name, right? In the same way, so I'm giving at account dot rating. Okay. Now let's deploy and see. Right click and deploy and see how it looks. Refresh. Okay, maybe I did not change the ID. So you are seeing account name, and I think this setting also I did not change. But so there is no proper alignment and nothing, right? So I want to see with the proper alignment. And also multiple rows, there is an attribute. Maybe I will define a size. If you divide the screen into 12 parts, so how many parts of the screen this should occupy? So once that is reached, it should again display one more item in the second row like that. Okay, so let's say I'm saying it should occupy out of 12 parts, 3 parts in the screen it should occupy. In the same way, it should occupy, so maybe 3 parts, and let's see how it works. Okay, so now right click and deploy, go back, and also change this. This is account information. Say account info, right click, deploy, see how it looks. Okay, I mean, in all my examples, whatever I am explaining, if you can practice, we get to know how to use these UI tags and whatever, so that when we start with one complex example, we will get the ideas. So which one we need to use and all those things. Okay, just refresh. So now if you see, so we are seeing like this, maybe it is fine now. So now what I want, right? I want to give left side space, right? Padding. So what we need to use? Okay, so maybe practically remembering is very difficult. So I strongly maybe recommend you to go to this Lightning design system. Under utilities, you can see padding. You can choose whatever the padding you want and you can work with it. Okay, that's the way how we. So because we have to remember many things and practically cannot remember already somewhere on top already we used that. Okay, so same thing I'm going to use for this entire layout, right? Padding. So that way it looks better, right? So when you are working, so people give comments and say they want to have some space and all those things. Yeah, so this I missed keeping inside the class. Deploy. Okay, so now let's go back and just refresh and see the preview. Okay, now if you see it's looking better, looking good. So this is the way. So how we deal with the different type, and there is also one of the type called function type attribute. But here one of the point is function type attribute can be used only within the function type attribute can be used only within Aura method standard component. Okay, so first of all, what is that Aura method? What is the purpose of the Aura method? So if you want the capability to call the function which is defined in the child class from the parent. Let's say we have a parent component, we have a child component. From the parent component, you want to call the method which is defined in the child component. In those situations, we use Aura method. Okay, so and also there are two things. From the child component, you are calling a function which is executing synchronously. That means which is not having any calling of Apex code or something like that. Yeah, that is one way. And also maybe from parent component and child component, calling a function which is calling one of the Apex method, which will give the result in asynchronous way. That time system cannot wait, let the parent component cannot wait until that completes, right? So in JavaScript, if something is happening asynchronously, to handle that later, there is a concept called callback. Callback function we define so that whenever the response comes asynchronously, so that will again put the result back into that callback function. Maybe I'll explain. I'll try to explain without having confusion. So all I need to do. So just I want you to focus on this. Okay. with the same names I'm going to create. So maybe with this, I'll show you how synchronous function we can call from parent to child, and asynchronous function in the child how we call. Okay, these are the components I'm going to create. Okay, in future also maybe if we have some confusion, you can see these notes and refer this. Okay, so first I'll complete creating the child component, and after that I'll create the parent component, and finally this component I'm going to keep in our current component whatever we are working. Okay, so this we call as component composition. That means using one component in some other component, right? Again, that component again we use in some other component. That is common, very very common thing when we deal with this lightning development. Okay, so let me create this component, maybe the child component first. Aura method child. Okay, I'm going to create one component. Press F1. This is the name I'm using. Okay, this is a component. Okay, now I'm going to only focus on this and complete this. Later I will close, maybe work on other component to avoid the confusion. Okay, so now the process of defining the Aura method, right? Aura method, which can be called from parent component synchronously. Okay, so this is here I'm going to keep logic for that. So actually Aura method, right? It is one of the standard component from Salesforce. Okay, so to recognize this method, we have to give some name. Let's say I'm giving as child method. So that's the name. So while calling, so what are the attributes they are going to supply? Function means a function will accept parameters, right? Here parameters we define as attribute. Okay, so let's say we are going to accept the first name and last name. Aura attribute, name of the attribute, first name, and the type is a string, default value. You can also give some default value, or maybe anyway from parent they are going to call. Maybe I don't want to bother about giving default. If needed, we can give. Okay, let's say I'm giving this one attribute. Last name is also one of the attribute. Now after calling from here, so what you want to do, right? Let's say whatever the first name while calling this method, so whatever is supplied, that one I want to print in the log. Okay, let's say we need to print in the console log. Okay, so for that, so to trigger a function, to call a function, we use action, and in a dynamic way. To call the controller function, here we use c dot name of the function, right? So let's say I'm going to give the name of the function as do action. So maybe for us it might be difficult to remember for first time. Always maybe after 2 months, if you don't work, if you work on other area, again we forget, right? So always you can refer the component library. So that is one of the standard component which you can find in the component library. So you can go to Aura, and here somewhere you might see, okay, here somehow in the documentation they did not provide. Maybe you can search Aura colon method and see, so what is the signature of that. Okay, somehow I think they did not mention here. Okay, so that is one way. Okay, so now action and through this we call, and I'm opening the JS function out of this, right? And also from there you open, otherwise here. So when you do like this, you see like this. Okay, so I want a controller, and if you want to fix this here, double click. Okay, now this is the controller JS. Now here I want to use a short form. I'm giving CMP, and I want my method name as do action. Right, same thing here. I'm calling c dot do action here. So whatever the attributes are there for this Aura method, to get those attributes, how we give event dot get pair. Okay, that is one of the method. So all the parameters will be supplied in arguments. So how I know that I need to refer? When you see documentation, they'll say the Aura method, whatever the attributes supplied, those will be accessible like this. Right? All we need to do, follow that and store. Right? So let's say I'm storing these parameters into one of the variable. So here I'll say params into this variable I'm storing. Okay, so now really if there are some parameters, right? I'm checking if the content is there, it is like a truthy value, right? If nothing is there, like 0, empty, undefined, those are falsy. That means it won't enter inside. So when something is there, it will enter inside. Now from that, I want to have, right, in these arguments, in these parameters, we have first name and last name. To access that, maybe here while printing console.log. So params dot first name. We need first name. And also when we use console.log, when you want to print multiple values, we use comma and print multiple values, right? Params dot last name, like this multiple values we can add. Okay, first name and the last name. And also if the parameter is there, we are printing maybe to know for us, right? When we see the console, just I'm typing here I'll say Aura method child to know that for us to know. So this we are printing in the child component. Okay, so this is the logic. Okay, so we're done. So in your project, if there is a requirement to call, to allow one of the function to call from a parent component, in our component we have to define Aura colon method name and what are the parameters you want to accept those types. And once after calling, so what is the function you want to call? Here get all those values and what you want to do with that, you can do. So this is the way, the syntax. So I believe it's clear. If any questions, let me know. Any confusion, any question, let me know. Okay. So yeah, now, so we are done with this child component. I'm going to create a parent component, because why I am saying parent, in that component I am going to include this as a child. Yeah, that's why maybe in one window I'm just keeping like this. And now we are creating one of the parent component with the name like this. Okay, press F1, Aura component, name of the component. So this is the name of the component. So now here, to refer the child component, we use C colon child component name is this, right? I'm giving this. And also in my code, in order to recognize this component, right? So when we deal with the standard component or custom component, to recognize that, we cannot directly give ID, right? If you see, we discussed about component IDs concept, local ID we need to define, right? So here, child component ID. Okay, this is how I'm giving. So here, this is child component, which is exposure the function method to call from this parent. Okay, just but right. So here, when you deal with the UI file, the comment will be like this. Okay, we have to give like this. Or in VS Code, we have a shortcut. Okay, so when you have a line like this, so if you want to command maybe control slash, automatically system will happen. Okay, so now how to call? Now we have this component referred, but how to call the function which is inside this child component? So maybe on click on a button, I want to call, right? So to button to call child component method. Maybe I'll say to initiate child component method. So from here, we call one controller function within the same component. From there, we call the child component. Okay. So here, I'm using lightning button label. Label I'm giving as, let's say, do action something, right? Let's say call child method name, just internal uniqueness for this component child method, and on click, okay, in a dynamic way to call the controller function c dot name, right? So maybe I'm going to create a function with the name call child method. Okay, this is the UI. Now this we have to define in the controller class. Okay, so now when you click here, I think it is very easy to choose from here. Go to controller. In the controller, another name call child method. That's the name we are mentioning. So like this, and now here we need to identify this component, right? Based on the local ID, how to identify this component? What we need to use here, right? If you remember, so what we need to use? Aura find, right? Already we discussed it in the previous example, right? So Aura find means component whatever here we have dot find, give the local ID. This is the local ID, so that it can recognize that component, right? So child component. So now this is entire this child component, but I want to call, right, here calling child component method. Okay, so dot. So what is the Aura method name in the child component? If you see, I'm just clicking on that child component. So here, what is the name we give? that we need to give like that. And what are the two attributes it is accepting? Again, I'm opening the child component. It is accepting first name and last name, right? From here, we need to supply the first name and the last name. Okay. So here, I'm maybe supplying Miguel last name, let's say. So I'm giving like this, right? So just I am calling that and see. So now what will happen? Now what we are going to do? This component, right? Now we are done with this, and I think first we need to deploy this one. I'm first deploying. First, I think we need to. Maybe I did not deploy the child component first. We need to deploy later parent. Or if you have the confusion here when you are dealing with multiple components, we don't know where we made change and where we did not make change. So one of the best ways. So I'm going to comment everything in this package.xml, and we are interested for this. At present, we are dealing with this Aura component. Okay, only that part. I'm just keeping here. Now, give your component names what you want to deploy. Right? We are going to also modify this data types component. We are also going to Aura method child and Aura method. I think the other component name is pair. Right? Okay, this way. So right click and deploy. All these three components will be deployed, which will make our job easy. Okay. Now, so before we deploy, so what happened? This child component first we created. We are adding that component into this. Here we have the button, and somehow this component I want to refer in the data types in our component. Okay, so here, so maybe here I am keeping Aura method synchronous example. Here I am going to refer the parent component C colon Aura method parent. Now what will happen? I am only going to refer this Aura method component. All the UI logic in the Aura method component, it will show as a button here. Now when I click on this button, it will call the child component, this one, and this will call the reaction in the controller. Okay, that's what will happen. And also if you want to understand in a step-by-step way, if you keep the debuggers, okay, so then you can see from where it is going, from where to where it is going. All those things we can see. Okay, maybe I'll try to show that. Okay, so that you'll understand what is the flow. Now we are going to deploy all these things together. Okay, deploy. Now go back, go here, and just refresh. So this one, right? This one is due to that call child method. Maybe somehow it is not visible in a more better way. So here I'm giving variant as brand. Brand means it will show in the blue color. Okay. So that way we can see that in a better way. Okay, and also even more better way if you want to see, I'm keeping in one component, and here I'll say Aura method synchronous example. Okay, now go here and deploy. Now it's deployed and just refresh. Okay, now when I click on this, right, this entire thing is due to this parent component. Right? Here, whatever markup we have, here we are seeing. Okay, this is not just visible because nothing is there inside that. So this button we are seeing. When we click on this button, it will call this, and it will identify this component on the UI. And in this component, here whatever function is there, to that it is going to supply two values. And now this in turn it will call the controller JS here, and so this will be printed finally. Okay, so that's what will happen. So right click and so try to see console once we click on that. So let's click on that and see if you see Aura method child, right, Miguel M. So if you see here from here we are printing, right? So Aura method child colon. This is what it is. So really from where to where it is calling, but we did not keep any debugger here, right? So what we can do, here we have sources. So maybe from here also you can keep debuggers. Okay. Anyway, first it will call the parent component, right? So you can click on sources, Control P, Aura method. First I want to see the JS of the child. From here we can keep. Okay, maybe here I am keeping the debugger. Okay, and also it is going to call Aura method child also. Right? But if you see whatever you are seeing is like it's not more readable. So when you see like that, you see this bracket, function bracket, sorry, these flower brackets. You need to click on them so that it will show this code in a detailed way, like this. Right now, it is more readable. Okay, so here I think somewhere our function Aura method child. Okay, so same thing, right? Okay, so formatted. So here our logic should be there. What is our function name? Maybe let's try to recognize based on the function name in the child. Do action is a function name, right? So maybe here search for that do action. Somehow that is here. Okay, maybe it is not able to expand this. Okay, so basically it will be reaching here. So maybe our method child. In this also there are two versions. Yeah, I think this is the right one, right? So maybe I'm closing. So here also I'm just keeping just one of the breakpoint. You can keep breakpoint like this. Now, so we kept one breakpoint in this parent and child. Okay, if you don't want to struggle like this, straightforward way is use debugger. Just give debugger, and this is the way to stop for the debugging. Somehow, if you don't want one of the way, or if you forget that in production already it is there, you cannot modify. This is the way we have to keep. Okay, now I'll show you step by step. When you click on this, if you see first, so it is right call child method, right, which is inside this parent JS controller. Okay, so this one. Okay, so now somehow it is identified the entire component. From here it is calling. Right after that, immediately it is stopped here, right here, which is in the child component. So it's reading all parameters. I think all parameters are here, and it's going inside. Now once that is completed, you will see it is printing. Okay, so that is what is happening. That is about the Aura method, how we work. But maybe whatever I explain now is not related to this data types concept, right? So I want to explain about a function type. So this function type we'll touch when we deal with that Aura method asynchronous. When you are calling the child method through Aura method asynchronously, that time we use a attribute inside the Aura method with the type function. So now I am going to explain about that. So maybe before I touch that, I start that. Do you have any confusion so far? Let me know. So are you able to understand? So any confusion?
Yeah, can you repeat the once again?
So where you did not understand?
Yeah, source like you show me that.
Yeah. So the thing is, at present here, this whatever we are seeing is this the preview of this application, right? In this application, I have referred only this data types component, right? Okay. So in this piece of logic is from this Aura method which we created. Okay. So in this Aura method, we have a button, right? So this is the button call child. So that is the button. So here I think plan. Okay. And when we click on this button, it is calling this the parent component, whatever the controller is calling. From here, this is calling here this Aura method. This is calling this one. And whatever we supplied in the parent to get that, this is the way. From there, we are reading the first name, last name, and printing. And that's the flow. That's what we are doing. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So now, to avoid confusion, I'm closing all those things. Now I'm going to give one more example. This time, how we deal with the asynchronous way of calling the Aura method. Okay. So for that, again, if you for your more clarity, I'm adding all components here, right? So I'm going to first create this child component, and here I'm going to call one of the Apex class, and we'll see how we call the Apex code. Whatever the Apex method calls we do, by default, all those are asynchronous. Okay. So let me create one method with this name. So press F1 and our component. Okay, so this is one of the component. Now, also in this, I'm going to define Aura method. Aura method. Name of the Aura method. Name child component, right? Other child method, child async method. That's the name I'm giving. And so since the thing is, I'm going to call one of the apex method. After calling this method, whatever the result of this function is there, the method is there. That is not immediate, right? The function will execute later some part of the logic asynchronously. So when that completes, right? When that completes, and that information, if you want to handle again in the parent where we are calling. Okay, so any asynchronous logic will be supplied as a callback in the JavaScript. Okay, I'll show you how we do that. Now we are going to provide a here we are going to provide callback function as the input for this. Okay, not the one of the data value. We are going to supply one of the function as a input. We are supplying a function into this method, one of the JavaScript function. Okay, so Aura attribute name. Let's say I'm saying callback. It can be any name, right? Basically, this is a callback function which will execute later. Okay, we supply a function. Once the result completes, later this function will be called. Okay, so now here type should be function. Okay, in the list of data types, one of the data type is function, which we cannot use directly inside the component. Only we can use inside the Aura method. Okay, so type function. That's it. Okay, so this is a method, and they are going to supply a function, one of the function as input into this method. Okay, so now when this is called here, what is the function you want to call within this method? Again, here also action. Okay, so here c dot call async function. That's it. This is the name of the function we are going to define in the controller. Now in the controller of this, go to controller. Okay, so this is the name of the function we are expecting, right? So it will call this. Now here also to get that parameter, component dot get param. Okay, so here arguments in this parameters will be there. Now I want to store this in one of the variable, right? You can maybe use constant or let's say I'm using constant params. Okay, so now all parameters will be into this params. So now in this, right, again we are checking is this, right? So params is there, it is there. So maybe I'm defining one of the function. Okay, so maybe the function scope I want to make it available later also. Outside I'm defining callback is equal to params dot callback. Okay, so I'm storing. So here whatever here it is applied, this one I'm storing into this variable. Okay, this is a function what they supply. this function is not going to execute immediately, because this function should wait until the call completes, right? The asynchronous call completes. Okay, now here we can say function name, which will be called after the async logic executed. Okay, still it is not going to call. We'll call later. Okay, now how to call the apex method. So far, I think in our examples, I did not show you how we can call the one of the apex method. So to call the apex method, first we should have the class and associate the class with the component. Right? Let's define a class. So maybe here in the notes, maybe I mentioned like this, I'm going to create the class. I'm going to create the class with the name. So apex class, name of the class. Let's say we are going to query some contacts, get some contacts and show. Okay. So now, so one of the point here, if you want to refer a variable or method which is present in the apex class, the variable or the method should be having a annotation called @Aura enable. Right? So this kind of signature we have to meet it. Okay. So just understand about that. Okay. So maybe here the return type, the method name, I'll say get contacts. The return type, we are going to return the list of contacts. For now, here maybe I don't bother about this try catch for now. So now make sure that we use this. Without this in Aura, it cannot recognize this to call. Okay, so we have to use @Aura enabled annotation. When we use this, that method type should be static and the return type whatever you want. Okay, you can also take the inputs. For now, we are not getting, maybe I don't want any inputs. Okay. So let's say if you want, right? Let's say so I'm taking one integer as input, right? Number of contacts, how many contacts they want. Okay, so and now here I'm taking a list of contact list is equal to, I'm defining select. So let's say ID comma first name comma last name from contact limit, maybe right, whatever the limits applied number of contacts, that much. Okay, finally we are going to return that. Let's say I don't want to return null. Okay, sometimes this might be null, it is equal to null. Since I don't want to return null, I'm creating one empty contact list and return to avoid null pointer exceptions kind of things. Okay, this is optional. Just finally, if everything is okay, contact list, I'm adding, I'm returning. So this is a method, right? Already Apex we know. Here, not more focusing on Apex, right? Except dealing with this syntax. So now this is the Apex method. We are going to call this. First of all, to call, we need to associate this class with the component from which you want to call, right? So in the child component, here I want to call. So here first from the component, we need to associate to that one. So we use controller. controller is equal to the name of the class. So this is the way how we associate. Now once we associate, if you see, if beyond the screen size, if you have many components, from left side you can see. Right? Next it is there. I'm choosing. So from here we have to call the method present in this. Okay. So here create instance of the method. Okay, we are not going to call. We are just creating an instance. Okay. So now let's say constant action is equal to whatever the, if you want to call the apex method, here whatever the name we give, component dot get, and here c dot name of the method which you want to call in that class. The name of the method is get cons. Right? So here c means server controller. Okay, but one more point, with the same name, if you define one of the function within the controller, system give more priority to this controller JS function, and it will call JS function instead of our server method. So that's why always we have to make sure to maintain a different naming convention for the JS functions, the controller functions, and the apex method. What will happen when we start newly, not even when I start newly? So we give the function name and the apex method name same. And we think that we are calling the apex method from here, but it is going to call this same method again and again, and you see any result. Okay, so make sure to maintain different name for the controller functions and apex method. Okay, so now this is just instance of that apex method which we need to call, and is that method is accepting any parameters. Okay, to set the parameters, action dot set params. Okay, that is one of the method into this in a object format. In the JavaScript object format, we have to supply the parameters, name and value pair. Right? We have to supply. So now here exactly whatever the name this method is expecting, same thing we have to mention. Okay, that is one of the rule. Number of contacts, and the number for now I want only 5. It will get 5 contacts, and so that's one. This is just setting, but still we are not calling. Right? To call apex method asynchronously. Right? For that, $a dot enqueue action. Okay, this is the function we need to use. Now the instance of the method which we stored into this, right? This will call. It will give result later somewhere, right? To handle the callback, right? Handle callback response, which will come somewhere later. Okay, so we keep action dot set callback, and here this callback function, it accepts through parameters, 2 parameters, this and one more function. This function, when the response comes, that time this function will be executed. Technically what will happen, JavaScript, it will execute this, it will set the callback, but it won't execute the function inside this. It will execute, once the response is received, it will go back and call this, execute the function. So that's what will happen. Okay, so here, so response. So whatever the response after callback, it will enter inside this. And now this is not the response of this method. Okay, whether the method is called or not, in between internet is disconnected and it is incomplete. It might be anything. So it's the overall status we need to know. Okay, so here, so I'm just defining state is equal to, so response dot get state. Okay, I'm getting the state. So this state, you see, if you see documentation, one of the state success, maybe error, incomplete. You see different states. Okay, so now state is equal to, right? In JavaScript we use triple equal to, right, to check even with the data type of the variable also. So here I'm checking, is it success? If it is success, so what you want to do? If it is error, so let's say I'm also using else if the state is equal to error. Error, right? So what you want to do? Else it is not error, it is not maybe success, maybe it is incomplete or something else, right? Maybe that part I'll handle later. Console dot log. Here I'll say handle later. Okay, but here, so in case if there is error, get error, right? Whatever the error it gives. For now, I want to print in the log. Okay, so console dot log. The error I'm going to print in the log. So in case of success, okay, so this is success. In case of success, so what is this method is returning? So that response, right? Context, it is returning the context, right? So context is equal to response dot get return value. So basically this get return value is the one which it returns exactly whatever the class returns. Okay, so that we are assigning to this. Now we have the context into this. Now, right, now here our execution is completed. Now we need to call this, right? Now we need to call and into that function. So I'm going to supply these contacts, whatever we got. Right? Setting callback result, which will be available in the parent component. Okay, maybe still we did not create that. We don't have time for that now. Maybe tomorrow I'll create that parent component. Again, I'll explain one more time. Create the parent component, and this response will be again. This logic will be executed there. Okay. So that function, whatever we supplied, as per that it will execute by taking this input. Okay. So we'll see that tomorrow. Okay, because we don't have time. For now, maybe I want to deploy this. I'll deploy. And also maybe today I'll create a GitHub repository by, so all we need to do, I thought of that, I will show you. So here we need to install one plugin called GitHub extension. Okay. So once we create, we have to initiate the repository, and I'm going to place this in GitHub. Okay, maybe for now today I'll keep this in the Google Drive. Later, maybe tomorrow, maybe in the session itself, I will show you how we push into GitHub, and I will share that GitHub repository with you, all of you. Going forward, I will be pushing into that repository on day to day to see our changes. You can look into that repository. If needed, you can pull that repository into your VS Code. Okay, so before ending today, any questions, anyone? So
Yes,
are able
Srinath,
to, yeah, yes.
Yeah, just one question. So you said we can get confused when calling methods from the Apex controller and the JavaScript controller because the syntax is the same, C dot name of the method.
Yeah, so not about that part. So maybe let me, where is that? Yeah, so here maybe C dot means it might be when you say C dot, and here whatever the name we give, if the system finds a function with this name within this controller JS, system give priority to that function, and it is going to call that JavaScript function itself. Okay, if the system did not find the name with this, right, so then only it is going to call the apex method which is with this name. Okay, so now what will happen sometimes if we don't know this point, this method name also we give like this, right, and our apex method name also same thing. Now we may think that here we are calling apex method, but what it will do, it will call this again and again. This will only call, and you don't see the result. So that's why what I am suggesting, don't give the controller JS names at which is same as the method name in the class which we associated to this component. You understood, right?
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? So are you able to follow, or anyone is finding any difficulty on understanding? Or do you feel something faster or anything? Let me know. Okay, so every time I use it to start with one straightforward requirement and a complex example. I think the people told that I think for them they find difficulty. This time, step by step, maybe I'm following the syllabus and explaining all the basics. Later we discuss about some project. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow. Thank you.